Welcome to Indianapolis, and the home of Big Ten football media days. We're inside Lucas Oil Stadium. A busy couple days for the conference, but for Nebraska specifically, they spoke on day 2 of 3. Sean, what were your big takeaways from the Huskers on this day?
Well, they were kind of sandwiched between a lot of other things. You know, USC and UCLA were part of this day. Iowa was here. So it was an interesting day of just storylines all over the map, right. With Penn State here too as well. But I thought Matt Rule, again, addressed a lot of issues, talking about the future of NIL, the future of roster sizes moving forward, because these are big things for Nebraska. And he was honest. He said, look, our NIL has taken leaps and bounds steps over the last few months, but we're still behind teams like Oregon and Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And we have to get to that level, he said, in order to compete long term. And Troy Dannon made the same comment as far as that $15 million marker that SEC teams have already thrown out they want to use of the in-house money. He's like, look, whatever the top dollar is, we're going to have to be at that top dollar.
Yeah, if you want to compete, no question. And now they're talking roster size limits. That came out during this media day session. What does that mean for Nebraska?
Well, as Matt Rule said, the devil is in the details. 105 players, yes. Well, that used to be the training camp roster for years, the 105-man fall camp roster. With COVID, we've seen that number go to 115 to now 120. So what will the actual roster size limits be? Will it just be 105 flat? Or could you have an additional group of players that aren't on your, quote, training camp roster that continue to practice with you and do things, but they wouldn't be active? And can you replace players that get hurt with another player? I think there's a lot of questions still on this. And Matt Rule really wanted 120. He wanted 110. It sounds like 105, though, is going to be that number, according to the reports today from some of the national outlets.
Yeah, and how do they integrate to get to that 105? It'll be interesting to see if it's all everybody has to be there at a certain point, or do they slightly go back and before having to get to that deadline. All right, let's talk about grass. Grass fields, that's a big topic of conversation. Memorial Stadium is getting rid of the turf.
Yeah, Troy Dannon, hinted this a couple of weeks ago with Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, confirms that hey, 2026 is the target point. There's still some things they've got to get done to get this grass set up, but all steam ahead, all boats ahead right now to get grass in Memorial Stadium. Lots of questions too. What about the high school football championships? Because can you play 6 games and then have a Husker game a couple days later? Troy Dannon said, yeah, they've made grass so much better and the care for it and the product that this is not the 1980s or 90s. Like they're very confident. And you see teams replace their grass in a few days now with the technologies and things out there. So that will be something to watch. The cost of grass, though, will be a significant increase. I'll be interested if the University of Nebraska's turf management college program will have some sort of tie into this. I mean, there's a lot of things still that we'll learn about this decision. And we've got 2 more seasons, at least it looks like, on turf.
Let's talk about the new teams real quick before we talk about Nebraska and camp. What'd you think? Like, it's kind of weird when you see all the logos and you see an Oregon and a USC, UCLA, and Washington. It's going to be a different deal, but Matt Rule really embraced the opportunity that these new teams present.
Yeah, I feel like the coaches from the new teams, none of them really tried to say much. I mean, none of them have big personalities. I mean, Deshaun Foster,
he didn't say much at all.
He gave Scott Frost a run for the opening statement from a couple years ago up there. But Lincoln Riley, never a guy that tries to draw a lot of attention. So I felt like they just tried to blend in the room instead of trying to dominate the room. Dan Lanning might have something to say a little bit different when he talks, but it feels right to me. I know there's a lot of people that don't like this and what's happening, but these teams feel like good fits with the Big Ten Conference.
All right, we've talked a lot about the stuff happening at Media Days. Obviously, the big story for Nebraska fans is the opening of training camp. Just give me a couple storylines to keep an eye on as we kick off training camp midweek next week.
Well, the timeline on naming, presumably, Dylan Raiola the starting quarterback. How deep will Matt Rule go before he says those words? I mean, I think we're all interested, and we all expect it to be Raiola, but when will he say, Dylan Raiola's our guy, we're getting him ready to start against UTEP? I'm naturally intrigued. I want to see just some of these new parts come together. Carter Nelson, we heard a lot about him. Some of these new receivers they brought in as well had great springs. Can that continue? Micah Mazuka, a transfer on the O-lines, a guy to watch. On the back end of the defense, that cornerback spot. Marquise Buford, is a guy to watch on the back end of the defense. He's got versatility. Sierra Wright's here. Jeremiah Charles. We know Bly Hill's out. So that's one position they've got to get figured out. We know Tommy Hill's got one corner. Who's that other corner? I feel like this defense still has about everything else set in place right now.
Well, it's going to be fun. The training camp kicks off July 31st. The season opener against UTEP is August the 31st at Memorial Stadium.